everyone, thanks for joining us for today's Fireside chat on getting your first seed fund. With us today, we have our guest speakers, Ms. Athena Lee from ZoomVet, Dr. Viveka from WISE, as well as Mr. Joshua Lim from MedTech Actuator. And today we'll be sharing on more on the topic of the startup journey, as well as some challenges faced by startup innovators and entrepreneurs in getting their first seed fund, and what are some of the best practices in moving forward. So thanks for joining us today. As we mentioned before, this is a very conversational and laid back sort of discussion. So if you would like to join us on stage to ask any of our panelists any questions that you might have, any topics or concerns that you'd like to raise, please feel free to raise your hands and in the chat function, and we'll be able to invite you on stage to share with us as well. If you'd like to pose any questions, you may do so in the conversations tab, and post your questions in the Q&A, and we can also bring it up on screen for our panelists to see. Yeah. And so with that, once again, can we give a warm welcome to all of our panelists onto stage? Yeah. And so with that, I'd like to start off the session maybe by talking a bit more on the general topic of, I guess, getting your first seed fund. And I think the first person that I'd like to direct this question to is Athena. So Athena, I understand that just like I think 2 months ago, ZoomVet secured quite a sizable seed fund, and it's definitely something to be respected as well. So I was wondering if you'd like to start us off on this topic by maybe walking us through how the entire experience was pitching to a venture capitalist, and maybe some of the takeaways and lessons that you managed to gain from this experience.
Sure. Thanks for having me today. So it's really great to be here and to share my experience. So seed funding, a lot of people ask me about this. Personally, for me, it was incredibly difficult. We launched our product in February of 2020. So it was right before COVID, and it was an interesting time for us because we happened to be in the telehealth space. So we're providing remote care services. So I think for us, right from the get-go, we were able to generate revenue. The initial growth was quite good. I'd say that things started getting a bit trickier once the lockdown restrictions had loosened up a bit and people were going back out. And that's where we lost our direction a little bit. So that's also when we started thinking, or even started to plan for our fundraising, because we had big, and we still do, we have big aspirations, and we see a lot of gaps in the pet care market. It's something that we're not only passionate about, but something we have a lot of ideas in terms of how we want to fix the whole ecosystem. So we definitely started talking to investors around August of 2020. And I'd say that's when we started taking fundraising a lot more seriously. So we had some money in the bank, but we would definitely run out if we were to expand and continue operating at the rate that we did. So we were planning to close by Q4 of last year. So, get all the due diligence out of the way, but that didn't happen. And what I started realizing in talking to more people was that there's definitely an art to talking to investors. And what I often tell other founders, and I wouldn't say that it's the right way to do it, but I think it's one way to do it, is to really listen and understand what investors are looking for. And also, they give a lot of good feedback to you if you ask for it. So you have to be proactive in creating those relationships, in listening and using the feedback that you're getting, regardless of whether it's positive or negative, to improve the way you're delivering your message, but also just to think about your business model as well, right? So if everyone is telling me no, is there an issue there, right? And if we're not growing as quickly as we thought we would, is there an issue there? And how can we implement this feedback? And so for us, it was quite interesting because we definitely took a lot away from the conversations we're having with investors, and we learned quite a bit. So if you look at my pitch deck now versus what we had in August of 2020, it's completely different. Like I'd say the key messaging, the look and feel, we even reduced it from like 20 slides, I think, down to 7. And that actually turned out to be enough, right? If you had the right types of information on there. And I'd say the second piece of advice is rather than looking at it from a fundraising perspective, I think people can sense desperation if you're just asking for money. Think of it as a relationship building exercise. So investors aren't just going to give you money, and you start to realize this, right? They have to trust in the founder. They have to trust in the business that you're trying to build. So amazingly, our lead investor for this round was someone I had met a long time ago. And it was actually through a Grab hitch ride. And I thought nothing of it. We had this conversation. We ended up meeting up for coffee. And then throughout COVID, we had a few conversations, but nothing set in stone, right? We hadn't even talked about fundraising initially. And it wasn't until end of last year, he started becoming really interested in the sector, and he saw that we were growing, and it really fit his mandate. And then that's when the conversation started. And from there, it just moved really quickly, right? So I'd say don't ignore any interactions, right? Every interaction is important. Everyone can give you a unique perspective on the business you're building. So really try to branch out and talk to as many people as possible and maintain those relationships.
Well, I think that's an amazing story to hear, especially about the Grab hitch. I think I'll definitely keep that in mind the next time I'm on a ride sharing app.
Yeah, for sure.
Joshua, can I pivot to you right now and just ask you, coming from the accelerator and more investor facing side of the conversation and perspective, do you have any additions or any nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to share on this topic as well?
Yeah, definitely. Miss Athena definitely said a lot of really great things and really astute things. Something I would like to reiterate, right, is you need to build a relationship with your investor first. So from an investor's perspective, right, us investing in a startup is like getting into marriage, right? This is a long-term thing. Nobody's going anywhere anytime soon, and we better have a very good relationship, right? So it's always good to build a really good relationship right from the start, right? If you have a good first note, things will then be really easy for you down the road. So some of the things that I personally look out for is how prepared is the investee when coming to me, right? So when, for example, some people just talk everything about themselves, right? And at the end of the day, my question is, what relevance does your company have to my mandate, kind of thing? So this is really, it puts everybody in a very bad light. And why am I wasting my time? Why are you wasting your time? It's just off. Plus, all the investors will talk, right? So investors will check with each other. Hey, have you met this company before? Do you want to join us in this round? Oh no, I actually had a very bad experience with this person. So, coming to Miss Athena's point again, every single opportunity is very important, and it doesn't matter what you say to one person, everybody will know about it. Right, so you can make a very good impression, everybody will know about it. If you make a very bad impression, again, everybody will know about it. So understand your investors, find out what their mandate is. A very quick and simple check is their website, right? So if investors are up and open, they will typically list the startups that they have invested in before on your website, and you can just go in to take a look and say, okay, look, he's in physio, this person is in rehab, I'm in digital rehab, right? So yes, I'm into your mandate, and I can potentially complement your other companies in this way. So this is something which you can do to prepare yourself ahead of the investors. Talk to probably one of the startups that you invested in as well. This is the way that the startups can actually do due diligence on investors, right? Investors will do due diligence on startups. That's very normal. But nobody's saying that startups cannot do due diligence on investors, right? Talk to startups, ask about their experience, ask how have this investor helped you. Is he useful? Is he just drop and go? Is he a light touch investor? What kind of investor is he? Does he suit your management style? Right? Some investors are very involved in the company, so they tend to go in and say, hey, we want to change everything. Are you open and willing to accept this kind of thing? Because investors will also be looking for coachability. Right. So this is very important. Some investors are just a very light touch. Okay, look, I'm going to give you $500,000. I don't really care what you do with it. Just update me once a year in your AGM, kind of thing. So again, does that suit your style? Do you need more help than just once a year update, kind of thing? So be prepared both in terms of the mandate as well as the management style, your interactions with the investor as well. So probably now is a good time to end.
Yeah, to Dr. Viveka. Yeah, definitely. I think the comment about how everyone knows each other in the space, that was really that was the first time I experienced it, was with pitching Beyond Health Hack and realizing that everyone I was pitching it to knows each other.
Yeah.
It's like all of our sponsors on the right hand side of the screen know each other in some way or form.
It's a
Yeah, so that was
very small community.
definitely, yeah. So a good thing for all of our participants to keep in mind. Yeah, so Dr. Viveka, let's pivot over to you and see if there's anything you'd like to add on.
Yeah, sure. My experience is actually very different because Joshua and Athena are talking about raising investment seed funding. But for me, as the IP which was developed within NUS ecosystem, this could be useful for the other teams. And my technology is an implantable technology. So I was advised to stay within the public funding ecosystem and to raise as much as translational grant as possible. And I would say I really had the right support system, like you have Jumpstart, Grip, people who really directed me towards the right kind of translational grant. So it was easier for me to raise seed funding through public funded agencies. So that's how I know Joshua and all that, right? So I pitch and then we really resonate, the value proposition resonates with the clinicians and the patients alike. So I should say I'm glad that I managed to raise up to around 600K SGD as funding to develop the technology, but all staying within the ecosystem, within the public funding ecosystem. And I think it's not at all a bad idea to stay within and develop your technology further and then come out to increase your valuation. So that sense, I would tell all the teams, if you have an IP which you're developing within NUS, leverage in all the like Beyond the Hack, Jumpstart, Grip, all the opportunities that NUS gives and tries to raise as much funding as possible. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Joshua, can I ask if there's, like, on that topic of moving from publicly funded towards being privately funded, are there any, like, once again, like, tips or tricks in that regard? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I totally echo what Dr. Viveka has said. Leverage on all the public grants first, because that's equity-free money, right? So that will definitely help you in developing your technology, de-risking your technology and making it more appealing to investors. Moving on from publicly funded, likely first investors that you get are family and friends, right? These are what we call angels. So having family and friends on board shows that every people around you trust your technology. If you can get some notable angels, that would be very helpful as well. Right, so beyond family and friends, the next one will still be angels, and getting some notable angels on board would definitely help your cause. So these would be people who are notable doctors in your field, or notable angel investors, probably from Bansi or Angel Central. Right, so this will lend some credibility to your startup before you raise an institutional round. So getting your first institutional round would also be a strategic gain, because how would you pay your long-term gain? Right, so if let's say you want to stay in Singapore, you might want to consider some of Seed's Capital's partners or SG Innovate's partners as well. So these two agencies are part of what we call SSG equity scheme, right? Which means that the government will match 1-for-1 for funding. So you can actually raise half of what you intend to raise, and the government will match the other half as well. So it makes this a little bit easier for you to get the first fund. So that would probably be my recommendation. Athena, do you have any comments?
I not much to add there. I think grants are great.
Yeah.
That definitely helped us through like the first or the middle of last year. And not only grants, I think money is definitely one thing, but in addition to the grants, I think the great thing about them is that they typically come with mentorship as well. So do utilize that, because I think that having the right guidance can actually help you a lot in terms of operations, in terms of scaling, and really getting you to those KPIs that you've set up internally. So yeah, take advantage of that.
I totally agree with Athena, because having a good mentor throughout your journey really, really makes a lot of difference. Yeah, I don't think I would have done whatever I've done without having proper mentors at different stages. So yeah, I really believe in it.
Yeah, I think that's a good note for our participants to take as well, as they treat their mentors appropriately, especially if you win any prizes moving forward. All right. So, Athena, can I go back to you? Because I understand that just now Joshua brought up the topic of moving international, and like I understand that Dr. Anywhere and like even Zoomvet as well, they're like not limited to the Singaporean border. So I was wondering, right, when you pitch to investors, how significant is it to plan beyond moving past Singapore? Because like definitely Singapore is too small of a market.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually in Hong Kong right now as we speak. Launching our Hong Kong product next Monday. So I think as a product, right, it really goes back down to what you're trying to build and whether there is an addressable market outside of where you are right now. For me, when it comes to pet care, it's quite different from healthcare in the sense that it's not regulated. So I could build a international business that can have decentralized operations anywhere in the world and service any country. So even in Singapore through COVID, because there was a supply crunch when it comes to vets, we were already talking to clients or serving clients in Indonesia, across North Asia as well. So when we were pitching, it was definitely a big part of the story about it. It's not so much about what markets are you going to target next, but is there a possibility that people in other countries could eventually use or benefit from your product? And I think that's a key part of it. And that is what creates scalability, right? And I think, again, it's not so much about definitively planning out what markets you're going to next. It's really about building that story about how you're going to grow the product and make it relevant for more people. And so for us, data was a very important part of our story, just because when it comes to pet care, it's a very nascent market. And so no one's really thought about collecting healthcare data related to pets and how to use that in a meaningful way, right? So for us, we realized that pets are pretty much the same wherever you go, right? And it's really more environmental factors that will have a great effect on their health. And so in planning out our business, a very big part of it was that we don't want to operate within the four walls of one market. We definitely want to serve as many markets as possible, especially since we were in the middle of a pandemic, and we wanted to make sure that everyone would have access to healthcare. And so we were one of the first to do that. And having that remote care model did make it a lot easier for people to be able to access healthcare. And so, Hong Kong is one story, but I think the more interesting part of it is that we're now also servicing countries that have no vets at all. So Gili Islands, for example, is a place where we get a lot of calls coming in. So going back to your question, right? I would say be intentional about the story you're building. So scalability is definitely going to be important. It could be scalability in terms of going into other markets. It could be in terms of building a product that's relevant to people across the world. So think about what story you're trying to tell first and how that product could eventually cater to people outside of your home market.
Actually, to add on to what Athena has mentioned, so as she was telling her story, whatever that I was getting was, okay, she knows her USP and she knows her long-term strategy, right? So this is something to open up. And I was like, oh, right, so this is something for the participants as well. Know what this but this up.
Joshua, I think we're losing you. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why there's some
No worries, yeah.
But yeah, so know your story, know your USP, this and this your other competitors, and how you're going to use this as a strategy to grow your position. Yeah, so that was what I actually got from her. So she actually demonstrated that in her in this speech. So if you can do that, that will be very, very good.
So I think definitely like understanding exactly what your strategy is moving forward. That's definitely one of the things that our participants need to keep in mind, especially in this early stage of ideation. And as Athena was mentioning earlier, you can definitely pivot down the line as well. It went from a 20-page slide deck to a 7-page slide deck. So definitely, you definitely keep evolving your strategy and ideation throughout the whole phase of this ideation to innovation process. Yeah. All right, so fantastic to hear all of these different sharings and stories and tips and tricks on how to get your seed funding. So moving on from that, right, I was quite curious, and I understand that some of this might be, a bit confidential depending on the nature of the ask. But I was wondering, are there any like stories that you like to share? Any like fun or interesting stories when dealing with investors or dealing with investees that that you're comfortable sharing, of course. Maybe Dr. Viveka, can I lead off with you?
Okay. Interesting story. I don't think I have any such investor interesting story. Maybe I'll let Athena do that first so that I can then think about what I can share.
Yeah, I mean, I do have, I don't know why. I have a lot of stories. I think it's just the sheer amount of people I talked to last year. On the one hand, with COVID, we weren't able to go out and meet people. But then having this sort of remote technology where we could meet online, it actually opened us up to a lot more different types of investors, both locally and overseas. I'm trying to pick which story is good to tell.
Okay, I don't feel bad because she's thinking. I don't feel bad.
I think that I think what happens is you come across a lot of different types of investors, right? So Joshua is one type, but then you have the other ones who are in it for other reasons, right? So they may not be as interested in your company per se, or in you as a founder either, right? It could just be hype and they heard about this like pet care industry and they're like, we want to talk to you. And you definitely do get led astray. And you can definitely get bullied in the process if you aren't very careful about what you're trying to get out of this process. So to give you one example, this was very early on, maybe about July or August of last year. And to be quite honest, this is me with my 20-page deck, not a very fine-tuned story, just sort of going out there being like, hi, do you want to give me money, right? And so we basically went into this meeting and this guy just sat there and he pointed out, he's like, oh, you're a female founder. I think you should wear more makeup. You should definitely be wearing certain things like, I don't know, like a pantsuit or something.
God.
It makes you look like a more serious founder. I don't know if I can take you seriously as an entrepreneur if you're wearing certain things. So and you should be more confident in what you're, in what you're selling. You just don't sound very confident to me, maybe because you're female. So I've definitely come across these situations, and I wouldn't say I'm a feminist at all, right? But I was quite taken aback. And at that point in time, I was, going back and reflecting. I'm like, oh, is this how the investment world's going to be like? Do I need to actually change how I look physically, or, do I just actually need to meet different types of investors? And it was actually from that point forward where I told myself, no, I'm not going to cater to people who are just going to come and personally attack me for like various things that have nothing to do with my business, right? Because what you learn is that the more people you talk to, you're going to have your fair share of haters, but also a good amount of people who truly support what you're trying to do, right? And can give concrete and meaningful advice. So definitely don't get distracted if you have bad conversations, because they will happen. And I think it's good training in terms of grit and in terms of just, being confident about your product, and knowing the reason why you're doing it. And then, you go on and you have better conversations and it improves from there.
Definitely sorry, Dr. Viveka.
No, I just wanted to tell her that I really like the way that she decided to move forward, that she wouldn't cater to the needs of every person who's going to attack her individually and not look at her work instead. So that
it was hard.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad it shows the path that you chose.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear these type that investors still give these type of comments. Like, I wouldn't think that this would be the industry that has that mindset. Actually,
I don't think it was malicious. It wasn't. It definitely wasn't malicious. It was it was very conversational, but it did come up, and it was just surprising, I think.
Yeah, totally understand. Joshua, do you have any funny stories to add, like on that regard? I trust that you're not that type of investor.
No. I mean, as in, so I heard of other investors doing this, but probably not in Singapore. So they will actually be in more, how should I say, traditional countries.
Mm.
So, yeah, definitely not in my circle. I would, I did come across investees coming to pitch me in slippers before. Right? I know slippers is Singapore's national footwear, but when you want a check of $500,000, dressed apart, right? Look like $500,000 before I'm going to give you $500,000. I'm not saying that you don't look like $500,000. It's just that some people are a little bit sloppy, or they are very focused on their technology development, right? So that was I don't know if that was the situation. I don't think so. I think you are very polished. You carry yourself very well, so I don't think that really applies to you. But for the rest of the people out there, do take note of this.
Yeah, know your audience, know your investors,
Right.
and at least wear shoes. Good advice, Vivek.
One thing that I probably have to share is one startup actually came to me and said, okay, look, you're finding about 10 minutes of the time. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to ask for any money. I just want to get to know you, right? So this sets me off on the totally project, because I'm very used to people, okay, look, this is my product. This is what I'm developing this kind of thing, right? So I said, oh, okay, so if you want money, why are you coming to me instead? So as the conversation went on, I realized that, okay, this person just genuinely wants to build a relationship. He has a runway of 2 years, he really doesn't need any money. And, he just wants to build a rapport so that, by the time investment time is due, he actually can cross this bridge, so to say. Right, so it's actually building big funds, which I think was a very wise thing to do, right? I was very impressed by this video. So that's something which I consider doing as well. Not saying that, you should go and waste everybody's time, but, do targeted approach, right? Understand why this is a strategy for you, as well as for the investor, and try and build a relationship one way or another. Coffee helps. Everybody does in Singapore. I don't think pandemic. Now, after phase 3, we can always go out for coffee again. So letting the investors get to know the investees and vice versa would help the investor prepare his memo when the investment time comes. Right. The investor doesn't scramble and say, why did this investee tell me this thing before? Now I got to go and ask. So the investor already knows probably about 80% of the things he should know. When the investment time comes, it's just about what you are trying to raise funds for, and then the business. Other than that, I'm going to ask anything else. So that's struck me very well. And it turns out that, among my contacts, this person went to as well. So again, everybody knows everybody. So when people checks, they say, oh yeah, I know this person. I think he's good. Probably can invest. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So I think those are some great takeaways for our participants. Dr. Viveka, I hope you had
Yes. So I just realized that I just realized that one thing that I wanted to tell is last time when I was working with another technology, so it was a medical education software. So I was helping a professor to co-found a company. So we really went and spoke to an investor. So the professor has developed a virtual patient, and his aim was to sell this virtual patient portal so that medical students can get trained on themselves. And we were ready to pivot. Instead of virtual patient, you can replace it by anyone, like a virtual human being that a social worker can talk to, communicate, or whatever, right? So when we went to an investor, they really liked the portal, they really liked the rich data that goes behind it, but then they were driving us to do something that they wanted to do that was into their mandate. So it was like a tough call. They were really willing to invest a lot of money into it, but then we had to do what they wanted, like to do some community kind of a platform to test diabetes or something. So what I learned through that experience is that every investor would come up with their own mandate, and maybe they would push you to pivot into what they want to. A lot of money at the very initial stage of your fundraising might look very attractive, and you would want to let me do that so that I can get that money. But then I think that we shouldn't lose the core of what our vision and mission and what our real value proposition is. So that's one thing that I wanted to share. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think the common theme that runs through all three of the stories is like knowing your customer as well as knowing yourself. Like and like trying to work out the best way to match all of these two. And that's probably where all the funny stories come from. It's from all the miscommunication and different expectations in that regard.
Yeah.
So I think that this is really interesting sharing to hear from all three of our panelists. Yeah.
True. Actually, I wanted to tell that because at that time I was very young. I mean, it was like 3-4 years ago, right? When you're very young, and then you really think that, oh, and then the person that my co-founder was a very old wise man, right? You think that you have all the energy, take the money and do what they want to do, but then we should really sit and reflect. That's when like the co-founders have to come together, put the best of both their worlds, and then think through it, and then come up with a very good decision for the company itself. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So really great to hear all of the stories as well. So at this point, I think I can pivot on to another topic. So maybe once you along the journey, I guess we're moving along down the timeline. So after getting a seed fund, understand that there's a lot of expectations that come with dealing with investors and managing different stakeholders at that level. As Joshua was mentioning earlier, they could be the type of investor that just give you $500,000 and then tell you to give them yearly updates and stuff like that. So I was wondering, at this point, is there any sort of not really lessons, but like insights and I guess stories to share in this regard on the different styles of investors and managing their expectations as well?
I guess I can start. So I personally was, I wouldn't say picky, right? But we also spent some time doing due diligence on investors as well. And we met all sorts, right? And eventually our lead investor is someone who is quite hands-on. So we actually meet with them on a monthly basis and maintain a pretty active WhatsApp group as well, where if we have any questions, if we have any sort of business ideas that we want to run through him, we're able to do that fairly quickly. So that's just something that we enjoy as well as our investors. And I think it's a good way to just check in, right? Because at the end of the day, whether you do well or not, they will know eventually, right? So why not nip it at the bud and start those conversations early so they can help you pivot. I think generally we found that our investors tend to be very hands-on, but I also think it's what you put in as well, right? And so we, in a way, and don't quote me on this, we see our investors as extra help for our team. So a lot of our investors were strategic or have experience within the industry that we were trying to operate in. So we definitely utilize them. So even as for interviews, I'm like, I don't have time to do a technical interview, right? But let's see if our investor can do it. Then we'll just call them and be like, hey, you want to get involved? And they're very happy about it. And they can also help steer your company culture as well. So I think it's definitely about one, and the beginning stages doing due diligence and finding the right types of investors that are suitable for your personality and for your team. But once it's the money's in, they're shareholders, it's really about what you put in. So if the more help you ask for, the more they're willing to give. And for me, I see no downside to that, right? Because they are vested and they do want to help. And in a way, if you give them small little tasks to do, they're very happy about it, but just nothing too involved, which takes up too much time.
Definitely. I think this perfect opportunity to pivot to Joshua from the perspective of MedTech Actuator and like the different ways that MedTech Actuator actually supports their startups. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with Athena, right? Like, I mentioned earlier, this is a marriage. Marriage, pre-investment is dating phase. Everything's lovey-dovey, everything's going well. After the money goes in, that's when the marriage starts, right? Marriage has its ups and downs, and it's very important to nip it in the bud. For me, I like my companies to reach out to me and update me as and when. So we actually schedule monthly meetings as well. So this experience is quite similar to Athena. But on the other side of the coin, we actually do get companies that come to us for every single thing, right? So Athena also brought up a very important point. Involve your investors, but not too much. Also, my situation is a little bit unique because a medtech actuator is really a catalyst, right? So we actually educate startups, we help to catalyze startups to market, and we do partner with an investment firm to invest in startups. So we are sort of like the mother-in-law, probably, kind of thing. Yeah. So we help to bring up the grandchild, but we are still outside of the marriage kind of thing. Yeah. So we do try to facilitate the relationship between the investee as well as the investor as well. And coming in to help to augment things a little bit too.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect summary, and it's really great to hear as well. Like I mean, I myself, I was like wondering, when I saw the MedTech Actuator website, like where do you sit on the spectrum as well? Yeah, because I found it's a really interesting balance as well, and then maybe perhaps we'll hear more during the panel session later on international. I cannot say. Dr. Viveka, yeah. That's right. Perfect. So I guess Dr. Viveka, I'll pivot over to you in this sense. Like, I think probably dealing with public institutions is a very different perspective, right?
Yeah, and it's much more simpler, like makes life simpler, because what the thing that you should do is you gave a milestone, a roadmap, then every milestone just submit your report. Sometimes the people, like for example, I won this Lotus NUS Healthcare Award, so the donation money came from Lotus NUS. They don't even care about what we did with the money. I had to go and submit, this is what I did with the money that you gave. So I think my life is simpler than Joshua and Athena's life. Yeah. But I know it's not like this. Unfortunately, at the moment, I do not have any more valuable. But if the teams are to stay within the ecosystem, then definitely I have so much to share. Yeah, but I don't think it's a good idea to stay within the ecosystem for a long time, though. Yeah.
So definitely have a, as you were saying just now, have a roadmap and be prepared to hit certain milestones.
Yeah, that's right.
And we definitely want to encourage all our teams to be ambitious as well and explore, outside perspectives in that regard. All right, fantastic to hear about the post follow-up process in regards to dealing with the investors after they give you their money, in a sense. Yeah. So I was actually quite interested, and I don't know how applicable this is, because understandably the last stage of a startup from ideation to innovation is IPO and like actually bringing your company public. But I'm not sure if you all have any experience or stories in this regard, because like I frankly am quite interested to hear more about some of the troubles being faced, and like because you hear all the success stories, but like there are also, I'm sure there are a ton of stories from the other end as well. Yeah. So I'm not sure who to start off with. Joshua, would you have a bit more experience in this regard?
Definitely not IPO. Because firstly, my experience has always been very early stage, right? I'm probably the first or maybe just the second ticket that you raise as a startup. And after the first two tickets, you will definitely continue to raise many more rounds before you actually start or even have IPO. So my companies are probably Series B phase. So not IPOs, but unfortunately, some of my companies do cease to exist. Something that I would probably like to advise companies is that talk to your investors. Again, the very important message: talk to your investors. Because what happened with my previous companies was they told me, "Oh, I'm running out of cash in 1 week's time." I was like, 1 week? What do you expect me to do for you in 1 week? Kind of thing. Yeah, there's nothing I can do. So the founder had to not take salary for a few months, but unfortunately still can turn the company around. So be transparent, in an open relationship. That's all from okay. Be transparent in this relationship with your investors, and work with them so that they can help you as well. Because ultimately, it's their money. If your company goes under, yes, you put in a lot of sweat, a lot of tears, a lot of blood, but it's also their money, and they have a vested interest to help you as well.
Yeah, definitely great to hear your perspective on this. Miss Athena, may I pivot over to you? I understand that not preempting any news or anything, but like any thoughts on this? Yeah.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach here. When you're talking to investors, obviously the question always comes up: what's your exit plan? Is it going to be IPO? Is it going to be merger acquisition. I think that this narrative is very different from actually being an entrepreneur. I don't think about my exit every day. And sorry to my investors, but I don't, right? I think being an entrepreneur is just really chaotic a lot of times because you're dealing with, you know, the broader, you know, ecosystem and trying to figure out where you fit in, but you're also dealing with your everyday operational needs as well, right? What I would say is this, clarity of thought as an entrepreneur is really, really, really important and something that I have to really block out time to do. Otherwise, I won't do it, right? Because you sort of get mentally lazy sometimes. But as long as you spend time, at least, you know, once every week, maybe 3-hour blocks, just thinking through what you're trying to build and having clarity around that. And also clarity around the numbers and the metrics as well. So how much money do I actually have? Realistically, how much am I spending? How much am I bringing in? And then building, you know, it could be a dashboard, whatever it is, but spend time, invest in just really knowing what your end game is in terms of your product and your business model. I'd say that that's good enough, really, to cancel out all of that chaos. And I think you do get lost in that. And when you're lost in that, it's you become very myopic, right? And I think as an entrepreneur, the worst thing possible is to lose your edge and lose relevance. And so if that happens, you probably wouldn't even get to your next round of fundraising, right? Because you don't even know how you're going to build that product. So maybe not the answer you're looking for, but just really focus on clarity of thought as an entrepreneur and knowing what you're trying to build.
Yeah, I think that you know that's a great way to approach it as well. And like even though I was bringing up the topic of IPO, definitely agree that it's quite a late stage target. I was just interested in exploring it as well. Dr. Viveka, maybe I can pivot over to you. I'm unsure if you have any stories in this regard.
So I think I would just follow Athena's line and talk about exit strategy, right? So I definitely, when I entered into this journey, started thinking about exit strategy. For me, as an implantable medical device, it was always about merger and acquisition, right? Like because I was talking to big companies like Medtronic and J&J who were interested. So my vision was to improve the technology in such a way that one day they can acquire it and it becomes a part of their portfolio, so that I can go back and do something else and be a serial entrepreneur sort of thing, right? So that's my, and then I don't really have not heard any personal stories about IPO yet. Yeah. Not the people around me. Yeah, not the people around me. No one that I know did an IPO. Hopefully some would do it in the future.
Definitely, and wishing everyone the best of luck in doing so. All right, that's great to hear. Great to hear about, you know, exit strategy as well as more about IPO or even stories of mergers and acquisitions, and of course the whole planning process. You know, the thought process leading up to that, the years that entrepreneurs spend preparing for such a thing. It's really enlightening to hear as well. Because I feel like too often we get caught up in, you know, as Ms. Athena said, the chaos of just trying to make the startup work. Yeah, so it's really refreshing to hear all your perspectives on this as well. Conscious of that, I think that since we have no Q&A, we might be able to you know, indulge in the conversation slightly longer. I was wondering if you know, any of our panelists at this point, do you have any topics that you'd like to raise, or did any of the panelists mention something earlier that you'd like to expand on? Yeah. But perhaps if not, I think maybe one question that I was curious about, because I know that this whole throughout this whole discussion, we've been talking about takeaways and like lessons for our participants to have in their startup journeys. But I was also wondering, is there any pitfalls that you'd like to expand on to avoid? In particular, I guess, Joshua, you gave off the first example, which is don't wear slippers to meet your investors. Yeah, but I was wondering if anyone else had any pitfalls or like tips that they'd like to share in this regard, like any don'ts.
I think if I may, I have something maybe not controversial, but then I think I just wanted to share about my journey a little bit more, not on the success side, maybe on the failure side, if that is okay to talk about.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, WISE, I mean, Joshua would be knowing because I was working on it. This is my postdoc work as well as a researcher itself, right, for the past 4 years. And I really gained a lot of traction, so much of glamour around it, I would say, media attention and all that. But at the end of the day, I had to wrap up things with WISE. I decided not to take it forward. That decision was a really very hard decision. It's your baby for 4 years, and you're trying to kind of give. It's not like giving up and running away from responsibility, but then I had to bring things to a logical end and wrap it up. The limitation was in the technology itself. All the glamour and all the attention, people believe in your value proposition, but then as you work more on the technology, you understand that what the clinician needs and what you might be able to provide might not be the right fit. And even if you pivot, then you are losing on the value proposition. So that decision to wrap up things and move on to the next phase was also a very hard decision. But then I was advised by one really very great guy. He's also I don't want to take names, but he's a very big doctor, surgeon, right? Also my mentor, right? He told, it's not good to take money and then say, oh, I did, but it didn't work out. Instead, if even before that, it's not going to work out, it's an act of bravery to accept that before and then not to take the money too. You know what I mean? So that's also, I mean, if it could be useful for someone out there to not to take it very hard, but to be brave about sometimes wrapping up things. I would like to call it as wrapping up things. And then with the experience that you gained, you can move into a next startup or next job or whatever. So right now I'll be moving into A-Star. All the experience that I gained through WISE has what fetched me the next job, where I will be commercializing technologies from a lab, right? So it's always a good lesson learned for me. So that's something that I wanted to tell. Yeah.
Congratulations on moving to A-Star.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think knowing your limitations is a very important part as well. Yeah.
And I hope to meet Joshua more often again. Yeah.
We will be.
Yeah.
I'm at Block 79, so at A-Star Central.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I hope this time I better make it a success with my technology.
Yeah, perfect. Joshua, I think, would you like to lead us off on any more, I guess, fun stories or don'ts? Yeah.
I'm thinking what I still can share. Probably it would be, I'll probably use these words, right, that really sums up what Athena mentioned as well. Knowing yourself, knowing your products is very important. Knowing when to pivot and when not to pivot is also very important, right? People can put in different things. There will be different opportunities, right? Money is endless. What exactly are you trying to carry out? What do you have in mind? What's the vision for the company is very important. That helps to guide your decisions. That helps to guide your strategy as well. Right, and talking about strategy, cultural fit in a company is, or cultural cohesiveness in a company is very important. So that's something that I personally look out for when these two. So whether you can CEO work with the CTO, CTO work with the COO, are there any different things out there? Insights, why?
Sorry, Joshua, I think we're losing you.
Okay, sorry. I'll speak a little bit closer. Is this better?
Yeah, better.
Okay, so yeah, CEOs, CTOs, all did they need? Is it a chance meeting where the bond is not too strong? So chances are that if trouble hits, there might be a danger that one of them leaves, or do they really know each other for 10, 20 years? This is Swan Brothers, live and die together kind of thing. So that is also important, right? Because everybody plays a part in a startup. If one of them leaves, the startup will be handicapped. Startup probably can still go on, but it won't go on as fast as what you would like as well. So that it is very important. And for a very early stage investor, team is what I look at. So team, area of application is more important than technology, because with a good team, right, the investors can actually open doors, the teams can walk through the doors by themselves, and I just need to point you in the correct direction and you can run, compared to if this is a B-rated team, then I have to do a lot more work to help to make up the speed and the distance as well. So that is something which early stage investors will probably be looking out for. Again, this is very different from late stage investors who will probably be looking at your product, how you stand in the market, what is your financial traction, what is your financial projection, right, kind of thing. So that is something which you need to know who your investors are and how you pitch to them as well.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that harps back to a lot of the stories and lessons that we shared throughout this whole panel.
Yeah.
Ms. Athena, can I hand over to you to close off this with any last don'ts?
Yeah, I think this would be very concrete advice for founders out there. Really be prepared for your conversations with investors, right? So in addition to knowing your pitch, your product well, also know who you're talking to. They will catch you in your lie if you're just trying to like smooth things over, or if you're not sure about something and you're just sort of like, trying to fluff. They'll know, and it will come back to haunt you at a later date. So I'd say just have everything you need to sound like an expert in what you are doing. If you're not sure about something, just tell them. I think it's human to not know every piece of information, right? And just be responsible and tell them that I'll follow up with you. And it's also a good opportunity for you to create a touch point for you to follow up with them after anyways. So I'd say just be very careful. It's happened to me before where I said something that wasn't entirely true, and then like 2 weeks later I caught myself in the lie and I'm like, oh, okay. So I think that's really it. Just do yourself a favor and be upfront, because things will come out later on anyways during due diligence. So yeah, no need to lie early on.
Perfect. Don't smoke your investors.
No.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. So I think with that, we can sort of close off the questions from my end. And thanks to all of the 3 panelists for entertaining me for this past hour. I know that we have a question on from one of the participants. Actually, I'll show it on stage right now. I can answer this question definitely. But I thought that it might be interesting to get both Joshua as well as Dr. Viveka's perspective, seeing as Joshua is a steering committee member and will be judging one of the tracks, as well as Dr. Viveka, your mentor yourself. So I guess how best would you answer Angeline's question?
Joshua, do you want to go first?
I was about to say ladies first.
Okay, sure. Okay.
I can go first.
Okay. Go ahead, Benson.
Yeah. So Angeline, as I'm definitely not judging. Our team came up with the criteria, but it's up to the judges on how they choose to approach judging the teams based on their roadmap. I would say just think through the ideation fully, and of course be ambitious, but at the same time be realistic. Yeah. So this is my answer to the question on the roadmap. Yeah. So Dr. Viveka, can I hand over to you?
For my mentees, I always ask them to have a roadmap. You should start with a roadmap, and then when we work together, we can make it better and better. But we should. I mean, I'm a planner, so you don't have to have for next 10 years, but at least for the next 1 or 2 years, what you want to do. Then we can build it from there. So the earlier the better, I would say, because it helps you with clarity about how you want to take things forward. So earlier the better is the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably add on to that to say that, okay, look, you it's good to have a plan, but generally speaking, anything more than 1 or 2 years doesn't really make sense, right? Because you are early stage, you definitely pivot. Even if you don't pivot, you will augment, right, your technology. Whatever that you pitch, 99.9999% of the chance is that you will not use this product to get to market. So think about what you need for the next 1 to 2 years. I would say a good rule of thumb would be to get you to first in market. Right? Think about what you need to get to first in market. Technically should happen within the next 1 or 2 years. If not, you are too far behind. People will catch up, and the next wave of technology will come. right? So beyond first in market, the rest of the milestones can be very generic milestones, right? Like appoint distributors, look at whatever countries and stuff like that. For me personally, I don't really look at those milestones because again, things will change. But there are investors that will look at those milestones, right? So for me, I look at the first few milestones within the next 1-2 years to see whether is it coherent. Have you thought through everything that you need to think through, and do you understand what it needs to get over these milestones? So that would be what I would advise for your project roadmap.
Perfect answer. And I think definitely the last point on not only considering what are the milestones, but also what you need to achieve those milestones. And Julie, I hope that you take away, if anything, that one nugget of wisdom. Yeah. So I think with that, conscious of time, we can probably prepare to close off the session. And of course, I just want to give ask everyone to give a warm round of applause to all of our panelists for joining us this morning. They've really taken the time to come down and talk about this, very interesting issue of getting your seed fund as well as dealing with investors. And I hope all participants get a lot of takeaways in this regard in maybe approaching investors down the road, but that's not my place to say as well. Yeah. So just wanted to once again thank everyone for joining us today, and please and also to let everyone know to stay tuned for the MedTech Actuator Internationalization and Commercialization panel, which will be happening at 11:15 to 12:15. Yeah, and with that, we just like to thank everyone for coming down and also to say bye to everyone. Yeah, so thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah,
See you
thank
soon.
you.
Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone.